Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
It was somewhere around midnight when I found myself staring at my phone, the blue glow casting harsh shadows across my quiet apartment. And there it was, the photo that somehow managed to punch me right in the chest, even though I should have expected it by now. It was my younger brother Chase, standing under a giant silver balloon arch, holding up a glass of champagne with a "You did it" banner flapping behind him. Our parents beaming on either side of him like he'd just cured cancer. Except he hadn't. He had passed one, just one, real estate licensing exam after failing the first two. That was it. And in return, he got catered food, personalized cupcakes, 30 guests, a rented event space, and the kind of attention I had quietly dreamed of my entire life, but never dared to ask for. I sat there scrolling through pictures for nearly half an hour, letting the bitterness pool like acid in the back of my throat, knowing deep down that this wasn't about one party or one night. This was about a lifetime of playing second fiddle while being told I was the responsible one. You see, I was 32 years old, and just 2 months earlier, I had finally finished my master's degree in education. A journey that had taken 6 years of night classes while working full-time and paying my way through every damn credit. There was no applause, no dinner, no banner, not even a card. When I texted the family group chat that I was graduating, my mom replied 3 hours later with, "That's great, sweetie," and a smiley face, like I'd just told her I'd tried a new recipe. My dad didn't reply at all. Chase sent me a meme of a graduate throwing a cap with the caption, "Now you're broke and tired. Congrats." And that was the extent of it. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I told myself it was fine, that they were just busy or distracted, or maybe I hadn't made a big enough deal out of it for them to think it mattered. But that night, something broke in me, not loudly, not violently. It was quiet, subtle, like a door in my heart softly clicking shut. I sat there in my flannel pajamas with the hem starting to fray, no makeup on, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hand, and I made a decision I had been circling for years without ever fully landing on it. I went to my contacts and started one by one deleting my family members from my phone, not just unfollowing, not just muting, blocking, full-on erase from my life kind of energy. My mom, my dad, Chase, even Aunt Liz, who always played neutral like it was a sport. I removed them from social media, deleted our group chat. I even removed the family calendar reminders, the ones I always updated for everyone's birthdays and anniversaries. No announcement, no farewell, just silence. You'd think that someone would notice, right? That maybe the next day I'd get a confused text or a "did you mean to remove me" ping? But the truth is, nothing happened. Not for days, not for weeks. And that silence was the loudest confirmation I'd ever needed. I didn't matter, not in the way they wanted Chase to matter. I was dependable. I was invisible. I was the person they assumed would be okay, who didn't need the praise, the party, the recognition. And maybe that worked when I was 12 and cleaning up after my brother's messes, or when I was 16 covering for him when he snuck out. Maybe it made sense when I was 20 and they needed someone to talk to Chase about his DUI without judgment. But at 32, with a degree that cost me blood, time, and sleep, no, I was done. The thing is, you can live your whole life thinking love is conditional, until the day comes when someone else's mediocrity is celebrated louder than your best effort. And suddenly you're no longer willing to swallow that lie. You start to see every little moment from the past through a new lens, every skipped recital, every forgotten birthday, every time they told you to understand because Chase was just going through a phase. And you start asking yourself questions you never wanted to say out loud. Like, was I ever actually loved, or was I just useful? Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I scrolled back through old texts and photos, and there it was again, me, in my graduation cap, standing in front of the school sign, holding a cheap bouquet I bought for myself. There was no one else in the photo. My friend's mom had taken it because mine had said they couldn't make it. Something about helping Chase move that weekend. I remember shrugging it off and laughing about it. I remember making excuses for them before they even gave one. And now, all of these months later, the laugh felt hollow. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your family only loves you when you're convenient? When you don't make noise, don't ask for attention, don't require effort? And what did you do when that realization hit? Did you forgive them? Did you confront them? Or like me, did you choose something quieter, something colder? Did you simply disappear? I didn't know then that silence would speak louder than anything I could have said. I didn't know that the party I wasn't invited to would be the moment I rewrote the rules of my life. But that night, staring at Chase's smug smile through a screen, champagne in hand like he'd conquered the world, I promised myself one thing: if I wasn't good enough for a celebration, then they weren't good enough for my presence. And just like that, I vanished from their world. There's a strange kind of grief that sneaks in when the moment you've been building toward for years, through exhaustion, loneliness, self-doubt, and the kind of late nights that blur into dawn, finally arrives, and no one who should be there even bothers to show up. I remember that day with a sharpness that almost feels cruel, because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud or tragic or chaotic. It was just quiet. A silence so thick it seemed to press down on my lungs when I walked across that small stage, wearing a cap that didn't quite fit and holding back tears that weren't about joy or pride, but something far more complicated, something hollow. It had taken me 6 long years to finish that degree, working during the day at a middle school, juggling lesson plans, grading papers, dealing with kids who reminded me far too much of the teenager I used to be, while attending classes in the evening, driving across town half dead with fatigue, eating gas station snacks in my car, and crying in the bathroom when I thought no one would notice. And through all of that, I held on to one image, one ridiculous little dream. Me walking out of the auditorium, sweaty and smiling, into the arms of the people who were supposed to be proud of me. I'd see my mom, maybe crying, maybe snapping blurry pictures. My dad, nodding with that quiet approval he reserved for moments he couldn't ignore. Maybe even Chase, rolling his eyes but clapping anyway. I never expected balloons or a marching band, but I did expect something, anything. 3 weeks before graduation, I sent out a group text with the date, the time, and a polite message about how much it would mean to me if they came. My mom texted back later that evening, 4 hours later, if we're being specific, with, "Oh, sweetie, we might be out of town that weekend helping Chase move into that new apartment he just got. Not sure yet, but we'll let you know." There was no follow-up, no questions about where the ceremony would be, no offers to take me to lunch after. Just that, a maybe, tangled in a promise to be elsewhere for Chase, whose biggest challenge in life up to that point had been surviving on boxed mac and cheese and forgetting to pay rent on time. I tried not to take it personally. I always did. I told myself they just didn't understand how important this was to me. Or maybe they assumed I'd be okay without them, like always. But when the day came and I looked around the auditorium lobby, watching other graduates hug their families, pose for pictures, hold flowers, and laugh like the world had cracked open in celebration, the truth hit me so hard I thought I might throw up. I was alone. My best friend's mom had shown up, bless her heart, and gave me a tight hug and a Starbucks gift card with a sticky note that said, "You're a badass." And that's the only gift I got that day. That's the only picture I have. Me standing in front of a cheap blue and gold backdrop, holding my diploma in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, smiling a smile I had to force through gritted teeth. I drove home that night in silence, not even bothering to put on music, just the low hum of the freeway and the sound of my own breathing to keep me company. When I got home, I took off the cap, tossed it onto the couch, and checked my phone. No new messages. Not from my mom, not from my dad, not from Chase. And that silence, once again, spoke louder than any words ever could. Later that week, my mom called, not to ask about the ceremony, not to say sorry for missing it, but to ask if I could help Chase update his resume because he was thinking of trying something new. I said I was busy and hung up before my voice cracked. But the real gut punch came exactly 14 days later. I was on my lunch break, scrolling through emails, trying to ignore the headache forming behind my eyes, when I got the group text. Surprise party for Chase this Saturday. He passed his licensing exam. So proud of him, he's finally finding his path. Hope to see everyone there. Food and drinks provided? I stared at the message, then at the photo attached. A giant real estate-themed cake, already half-frosted with "Congrats, Chase" in bold red letters, sitting next to a stack of invitations. My mom had sent them out, my dad had RSVP'd. There was already a Facebook event. It had taken me 6 years, thousands of dollars, and every ounce of strength I had to walk across that stage, and they had managed to forget it in less than 2 weeks. I sat in my car that afternoon until the clock told me I was late getting back. And still I didn't move. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry even. I was numb. I realized in that moment that it had never been about effort or achievement or how hard I worked. It had always been about Chase. He was the squeaky wheel, and they were the kind of parents who couldn't bear the sound of squeaking, so they oiled him constantly, while I was expected to run smoothly and quietly and without complaint. That's when I knew I wouldn't go to that party. Not even for appearances, not even to show support. But I would go somewhere else, somewhere darker, somewhere deliberate, because I had finally accepted that the woman they saw wasn't me, not really. She was the idea of me, the one they didn't need to applaud or support, the one they assumed didn't break or burn out. But that version of me was dead. And the one who was left? She was done playing nice. The thing about betrayal is that it never arrives with a dramatic bang or a shattering noise. Instead, it comes softly, disguised as normalcy, dressed up in smiles and paper decorations, hiding behind plastic champagne flutes and poorly made congratulatory speeches. And when it finally reveals itself, it doesn't scream. It just sits there, quiet and unapologetic, daring you to say something. I wasn't going to attend the party. I had already decided that, somewhere between rereading the invitation and deleting the Facebook event notification that kept resurfacing like an unwanted ghost, I had no business being there, no interest in pretending to clap for my brother while swallowing the growing lump in my throat that had been lodged there since graduation night. But something inside me, curiosity maybe, or a final sick desire to see just how far they'd go, compelled me to show up anyway, if only for a moment, if only to collect the last piece of evidence I needed to confirm what I already knew but didn't want to admit. I arrived late on purpose, parking a block away so I wouldn't have to make small talk with people I hadn't seen in years, relatives who only remembered I existed when they needed help moving furniture or someone to babysit their kids. The event space was rented out in a part of town I recognized from high school dances. Low ceilings, too many folding chairs, and that faint smell of canned air freshener trying too hard to mask something old. The moment I walked in, it was like being hit in the face by a wall of enthusiastic mediocrity. There were metallic banners spelling out, "You did it, Chase," in oversized letters that nearly grazed the ceiling tiles. A giant printed poster of him, posing in a button-down shirt he probably didn't even iron himself. And a dessert table so elaborate, it looked like it had been lifted straight out of a Pinterest board dedicated to overcompensating for average accomplishments. People were laughing, music was playing, badly chosen pop hits from a Bluetooth speaker that Jean-Savoie occasionally cut out. My mother was near the front, wearing a bright coral blouse and clutching a glass of white wine like it was a trophy, beaming as she introduced Chase to a small crowd of family friends, most of whom probably thought the certification exam he passed was on par with a PhD. My father stood nearby, less animated, but no less proud, nodding along as someone recounted how impressive it is to pass on the third try, as if perseverance were the same thing as excellence. I lingered near the entrance, out of sight, letting the absurdity wash over me, and in that moment I felt like a ghost at my own funeral. There was my family, smiling and proud, celebrating someone whose greatest act of discipline was waking up before noon twice in 1 week. And not a single person mentioned me. I waited. I waited for someone, anyone, to say, "Didn't Rachel just finish her master's?" Or, "Hey, why isn't Rachel here?" But all I heard was laughter and the clinking of plastic glasses and the sound of my mother gushing. "He's really turning his life around. We're just so proud." Eventually, I walked in. Not far, just enough to be seen, to make sure they couldn't say later that I didn't show up. My mother spotted me first, her smile faltering just slightly, like she wasn't quite sure whether to be surprised or apologetic. She waved, then motioned me over, and I walked through that sea of people with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who had nothing left to lose. When I reached her, she leaned in for a quick hug that felt like a formality, and in the next breath she said, "Isn't this wonderful? I mean, Chase really needed this, no? He's been through a lot." That was the line. That was the moment. Not "how are you," not "we missed you." Just a defense, a justification, a subtle jab wrapped in a smile. I smiled back. I didn't say much, just nodded, scanned the room again and asked, "Did you make the cupcakes?" She looked confused for a second, then laughed and said, "Oh no, we had them done by this amazing little bakery downtown. All Chase's favorite flavors: peanut butter chocolate, red velvet, cookies and cream." Her voice trailed off as she realized I wasn't smiling anymore. I stayed for 10 minutes, maybe 12. I let them take a group photo with Chase in the center, arms wide like he'd just won a marathon, while I stood to the side, half visible. I watched as my dad toasted to new beginnings, and someone made a joke about Chase being the next real estate mogul in the family. No one asked me to speak. No one asked me anything at all. I was there, but I wasn't there. And when I finally turned to leave, I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out calmly without looking back. That night, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine that didn't taste nearly as celebratory as it should have, and pulled out my phone. One by one, I blocked them all: my parents, my brother, the cousins who shared the photos, the aunts and uncles who commented on them with clapping emojis and heart eyes. I didn't write a message, didn't offer an explanation. I wasn't interested in dramatic exits or theatrical farewells. I simply erased them, like they had erased me, and then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. And maybe you're thinking that was cold, or extreme, or even cruel. But ask yourself this: if your absence hurts no one, then what exactly is the value of your presence? If the people who are supposed to love you can cheer louder for someone else's bare minimum than your best efforts, then what exactly are you still fighting to stay close to? I didn't feel regret. Not then. What I felt was peace, the kind that comes not from forgiveness or closure, but from finally putting down the burden of pretending that what they gave me was enough. Because it wasn't. And now they wouldn't get the chance to do it again. Time has a strange way of dulling the edge of even the sharpest memories, softening their sting just enough that you can go about your days without constantly bleeding. Yet some silences are not soothing. They do not heal, they do not cradle you into peace. They stretch, echo, and scream in their own cruel language. And in the months that followed my quiet vanishing act, I discovered just how deafening that silence could be. At first, it felt like freedom, a long overdue escape from a role I had never auditioned for, but had been assigned since childhood: the sensible one, the quiet achiever, the emotional mule expected to carry the weight of other people's messes without ever demanding space for her own. In those early weeks, I breathed differently, slower somehow, with a strange mix of grief and relief pulsing through me like a storm had passed, but left the windows cracked and the roof slightly leaking. I focused on myself in a way I hadn't dared before, not because I hadn't wanted to, but because I had always been too busy doing damage control, patching Chase's mistakes, managing my parents' expectations, and editing myself to be palatable enough that no one could ever accuse me of asking for too much. Now there were no messages to reply to, no phone calls filled with casual guilt, no requests thinly disguised as check-ins. The quiet was mine, and though it was unfamiliar, it was also sacred, Professionally, those months were some of the best of my life. I got a promotion, assistant department head at my school, with a slight bump in pay, and the kind of respect I had always earned but never been granted. My colleagues noticed the difference in me, said I seemed more sure of myself, more grounded. I started going on long walks in the evening, something I hadn't done in years, letting the cool air clear out whatever residue the day left behind. I read books I'd bought ages ago and never touched. I took a weekend trip alone to Portland, something the old me would have felt selfish for doing, and I didn't tell a soul, not because I was hiding, but because it felt good to have something that belonged only to me. But the silence wasn't symmetrical, because while I had gone quiet, they eventually noticed, and when they did, the shift was not immediate chaos, but something more unsettling. A creeping awareness, like a light flickering in the periphery, that you try to ignore until it's too persistent to pretend it's nothing. It started small, a voicemail from my mother, her voice overly cheerful, saying she just wanted to check in and see how things were going. Then a message from my dad, one of those one-line texts that felt like a man trying to step into a room he doesn't recognize anymore. "Hey kid, long time, everything okay?" I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. Because what was I supposed to say? That I was fine now because they were finally gone? That my life had improved the second I stopped fighting for a seat at their table? That I had grown more in 3 months without them than I had in 30 years under their shadow? Then the messages started piling up. Birthdays passed, holidays rolled in like heavy fog. No call came on Thanksgiving. Then Christmas came and went without a single knock on my door, and that was when it shifted. The cheeriness faded, replaced by confusion, then concern, and finally desperation. My aunt, who always tried to straddle both sides without committing to either, left a voicemail, her tone sharp with worry. "Rachel, this has gone on long enough. Your mother is beside herself. Your father's been quiet, which you know isn't like him. Just come for dinner. No pressure to talk. Just show up." But I didn't, because by then, I had realized something important. My presence had always been taken for granted, not cherished. They didn't value me. They valued what I did for them, how I made things easier, how I didn't ask for too much. And now, without my steady orbit to anchor their family myth, everything was off-kilter, and instead of examining the architecture of their dysfunction, they just wanted the quiet girl to come back and fix it. And then came the voicemail that changed the tone entirely. It was early February, and I had just come in from the cold, my coat still zipped, cheeks flushed from the wind. I saw the missed call from my mother and almost ignored it, but the transcription preview caught my eye. "Something's wrong with your dad." That was all it said. The actual voicemail was longer, her voice trembling, not dramatic, but clearly shaken. "Rachel, it's Dad. We're at the hospital. It's not... I just thought you should know. Please call me back, please." I sat down at the edge of my bed, coat still on, heart pounding in a rhythm I hadn't felt since the night Chase totaled our family car. And I was the one who had to calm everyone down. For a moment, just one awful moment, I reached for my phone, ready to call her back, ready to step back into that role, the fixer, the daughter, the one who puts everything else aside. But then I paused, because I knew what would happen. I'd be there, by his side, holding her hand, comforting Chase as he cried, and no one would ever mention the months I was gone, the silence they ignored until it screamed. So I didn't call, I didn't text, I didn't go, I listened to the voicemail again, and then I set the phone down. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared about myself more. And that choice, the one to stay still, to remain silent, wasn't easy. It wasn't cold. It was the most painful kind of self-preservation. Because if I went back now, after everything, I would be sending a message that they could always treat me as disposable, and I'd always return. Weeks passed. They kept calling. They sent letters. Even Chase sent a video message, awkward and stammering, trying to bridge a gap he helped create. But I didn't answer. Because I wasn't ready. Because maybe, just maybe, they needed to sit with the silence a little longer, until they understood exactly what they had lost. There is a peculiar weight to being missed by people who only noticed your absence when their comfort began to unravel, when the silence, once dismissed as stubbornness or drama, becomes a mirror they can no longer avoid, reflecting every choice they've made, every birthday they forgot, every moment they applauded someone else's bare minimum while ignoring your hardest victories. By the time the letters started arriving, actual physical letters, not just texts or voicemails, I had grown so accustomed to their absence that seeing their handwriting again felt almost foreign, as if the ink itself were apologizing for belonging to people who never truly saw me. The first was from my mother, folded neatly into a pale blue envelope with my full name written in that careful, slanted script she used only when she wanted to seem composed. The letter was long, and I read it in one sitting, standing in my kitchen with the overhead light flickering above, unable to look away from the page, even as my hands trembled slightly. She wrote about missing me, about not realizing how hurt I had been, about assuming that I didn't need as much because I seemed fine. And that line, more than anything, cut the deepest, because it wasn't a confession. It was an excuse dressed up in regret, the same justification she'd leaned on my entire life. She said she was sorry if I had felt overlooked, that it was never their intention to make me feel invisible, and that they had just wanted to support Chase because he always needed more help. It was the same narrative I'd grown up with, that I was the strong one, the self-sufficient one, the one who didn't need praise or attention because I would always find my way. But no one ever asked what that kind of strength costs. No one ever considered that being the reliable one often means no one ever thinks to check if you're drowning. And now, after years of carrying that burden, they were asking for forgiveness with trembling hands and open hearts. Too late to rewrite the story, but desperate enough to beg for a new chapter. The second letter came from Chase. His handwriting was messier, uneven, like he'd written it in one sitting without editing himself, which, knowing him, he probably had. He said he'd never meant to steal the spotlight, that he didn't realize how much I had sacrificed, that he thought I didn't care about the party or the attention because I never said anything. And that was the truth, in part. I didn't say anything because I knew they wouldn't hear it even if I screamed. He admitted he was selfish, said he'd been scared his whole life, and leaned on the family because it was easier than standing alone. He said he respected me, that he envied me, that he wished he could have been like me. And at the end, he wrote something I didn't expect. I know I've taken up too much space, and I'm sorry. If you never want to see me again, I get it, but I hope you do. The letters kept coming, spaced out like slow drips from a leaky faucet, each one peeling back another layer of guilt and desperation, each one asking the same question without actually writing it. Can you forgive us? And forgiveness is a complicated thing. People talk about it like it's this one-time decision, a clean break from pain, but it's not. It's messy, uneven, full of contradictions. It's remembering and still choosing peace, even when every part of you wants to hold on to the hurt like armor. I wasn't sure I could forgive them, not yet. But I also wasn't sure I wanted to carry that bitterness forever, because carrying it meant they still had power over me, even in their absence. Eventually, I agreed to meet them. Not at their house, not in the place where my silence had first begun, but at a quiet little restaurant near the river where no one knew us and no one would interrupt. I walked in that evening with a calm I hadn't expected, dressed not to impress, but to feel like myself. And when I saw them sitting at the table, my mother with her hands folded, my father looking like he hadn't slept in days, and Chase nervously twisting his napkin, I almost turned around, but I didn't, because I wasn't there to offer comfort or pretend everything was okay. I was there to say what needed to be said. The conversation was quiet, filled with long pauses and unfinished sentences, but I didn't cry. I told them about how it felt to stand alone on graduation night, about the moment I realized I had become a placeholder in my own family. I told them that the party wasn't what broke me, it was everything leading up to it. every time they asked for grace without offering any back. Every year I was told to be proud of being independent, while they poured all their energy into saving someone who didn't want to be saved. My mother cried. My father said he didn't know, and maybe he hadn't. Maybe he just hadn't wanted to. Chase apologized again, this time out loud. And I believed him, not because it was perfect, but because it was imperfect in the way honesty always is. He looked ashamed. He looked like he finally understood. And for a moment, I saw him not as the golden child, but as a man who had been raised to expect love on demand and was finally learning the cost. At the end of the night, they asked if we could start over, if there was a path back to being a family. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, staring at the remnants of dinner, listening to the hum of conversation around us, and wondering how many people were sitting at tables just like this, trying to stitch something back together that had been fraying for years. Eventually, I said something that surprised even me. Maybe, but on my terms. And I meant it, because I wasn't going to be the one who bent anymore, the one who filled in the gaps and painted over the cracks. If they wanted me back in their lives, they would have to meet me where I was, not where they remembered me being. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. When I left that night, I didn't promise to call. I didn't promise anything. I just walked into the cool night air, breathing in the kind of quiet that didn't hurt anymore, and let them sit with the space I left behind. Maybe I'll forgive them one day. Maybe I won't, but either way, they'll never forget what it felt like to finally hear what I had been screaming in silence all along.